Mhm. Good evening, RDs and RDs to be. Welcome to RD Exam Ready Live. Thank you all for being here tonight to join us for RD Exam Ready Live as we are going to be reviewing food borne illnesses. Hopefully, all of you can hear me great. Let me know in the chat if you still can't hear me at any point. Tonight, like I said, we're going to be doing foodborne illnesses. So, what we're going to be doing, we've got a lot of material to go through. And so, what I have for you tonight is we're going to be running through a slideshow of some of the common foodborne illnesses for exam day. So I put up just a minute ago, just a little bit, just kind of remind everyone to rate, review, subscribe, check out all the areas where you can see more exam content. And then in the chat right now, I just posted a link to my emailing list. So I've got that in there now. If you feel like you want to go ahead and join that, you certainly can. Um, I think that it's just a nice beneficial way for you to be able to see the notes if you want to. I know some students definitely want to see those notes, so I wanted to make sure that you all have the ability to. So I just posted that in the chat there if you haven't seen it, and I'll post it a little bit on later during the session too as we go through things. Okay, so it's funny doing a mailing list. I'm like, oh, is that something that's necessary? But it's just a nice, easy way for all of you to be able to get the PDF notes after these live sessions. So I think it's a nice, beneficial way to do that for sure. Excellent. So, tonight, as I said, we're going to be doing major foodborne illnesses. And with the major ones, you might kind of feel like, hey, Zach, there's one you didn't talk about that I've seen in another resource. Remember, that's okay. I want you to realize that what I did was I built my lesson plan. I've talked through foodborne illnesses many times, but the CDR outline gives different references that they use to write the exam. And so, what I have here is one of those references. It's the seventh edition of the Serve Safe cookbook. And I love this book. very much, and it talks about major foodborne illnesses, and it gives us a lot of the major information that we need to know for exam day. So I picked out the ones that talk about in this book. It's going to be the ones that you're very familiar with, but that's all to say. If there's one that I miss, remember, it's all right. We're just focusing on the major ones today. So we will do that slideshow together. You can fuse the chat to communicate, to ask questions. I will say if I skip over some stuff a little rapidly tonight, that's just because we have a lot of foodborne illnesses to go through, and I don't want to hold you all here all night. We'll probably go about an hour to maybe an hour and 15 minutes because at the end of our slideshow, we're going to be doing a matching exercise together to test our knowledge. So that's our plan for tonight, RDs to be. Thank you for being here, and I say enough talking, let's dive right on into it. Very good. So, with our foodborne illnesses tonight, what I've kind of done as I break these down is what I'm trying to do is say, okay, I wanted to try to categorize them just a little bit, kind of categorize them in a way and group them up. In this Serve Safe book, it kind of mentioned this about how they tried to group up some different things based on things such as like the major causes of them. And that's what I've kind of done with our session tonight. So we're going to start with bacteria. We'll go into viruses, parasites, and then our different seafood toxins in there too. A lot of these are going to be very familiar with you. So let's just dive right on in. The first little group of bacteria that we're going to be talking about is going to be the ones that specifically talk about controlling time and temperature. Now, that being said, it's not to say that all of these that we're about to review are about time and temperature. Some of them are related to cross contamination or could be. But what they said in the text was these are the major ones that typically are being caused by time and temperature control. So let's group these up and let's talk through them a bit. Take a moment to get nice and familiar with what I put in front of you. So what I have here is I've given you a little box that says how these can be prevented, this foodborne illness, common symptoms, foods associated, and then a little trick that I came up with memorizing it. Now, I'm not talking about onset times for our session tonight. It seems like it's so overwhelming, and the onset times really cross over on each other. So, if you feel like you really need that onset time, please review it on your own. The only reason I'm not going to review it is just because I think we could go on endlessly with onset times, and truly, you have enough information already to review tonight. We don't need to add on top of it here. So let's start out with our first one here, Bacillus cereus. It's going to be probably one of many that I mispronounced tonight. With Bacillus cereus, it is prevented by cooking foods to the required temperature. When you cook your foods to a required temperature, usually you're killing off those bacteria. Also, making sure to hold and cool your foods accordingly, keeping them out of that danger zone, or at least using your 6-hour rule, is how you can prevent Bacillus cereus from developing on your foods. The symptoms of it is you got a couple types here. One type is called the diarrheal illness, and the other is vomiting illness. The diarrheal illness is associated with watery diarrhea without vomiting, and the second type is vomiting type with nausea and vomiting. I don't think the exam is going to ask you to differentiate those, but I thought it'd be good just to mention in there anyway. For foods that we see with Bacillus cereus, the typical foods that we see in this case are going to be things like cooked vegetables, meat, milk, and cooked rice dishes, especially. A lot of the times we'll see those cooked rice dishes, and those can be some major ones that can cause some of those things to occur. So let's look at our trick here. I'm coming up with all types of ways to try to give you an idea to memorize this. Some are stupider than other ones, I would say. So just keep that in mind and find one that works for you. One is the word bacillus. I always think of basilisk, and basilisk is like a snake. Okay, that's a basilisk, is a snake or a serpent of some kind. And so I picture a snake swimming in this big vat of fried rice. That's what I picture, is like this snake just swimming in fried rice. Weird image, but it helps me to associate and think of the foods that would fit with Bacillus cereus. Now, if you do have questions on these as we're going through them, please don't hesitate to post them in the chat. For sake of time, we're just going to keep rolling on through these unless you have any major questions, in which I will get those addressed. But if you're feeling good on Bacillus cereus, let's go ahead and let's give it a couple seconds and we'll roll on to our next one. Doing a Red Bull tonight, not very dietitian of me, but I got it from a food sample recently. So I said this would be a really good time for me to talk rapidly, talk clearly, go through some foodborne illnesses with my students here. Excellent. Let's get into listeria here, folks. Now, if you have something you think of for listeria, post it in the chat right now if you've got it. Listeria is prevented by one, cooking foods to their required temperature. That's a very helpful way to kill off listeria. Two, avoid cross contamination with raw products and produce and other ready to eat foods. And three, avoiding unpasteurized products, especially dairy, cheese, things like that. For symptoms, we see kind of two different things. With listeria, you might think of pregnant women, and that's usually what I think of for sure is pregnant women with listeria, but newborns can be affected as well. So in pregnant women, the reason this is a good one to think about is because miscarriage is the symptom that can occur. Super scary, right? But in newborns, it can lead to sepsis and meningitis as well. Even more scary to imagine. I've got a little baby right now, and I can imagine her going through that stuff. For foods with listeria, you're seeing a lot of ready to eat foods. So we have our ready to eat foods like deli meats, hot dogs, soft cheeses, raw meats can develop listeria, as well as unpasteurized dairy products. Those are all going to be your heavy hitters when it comes to listeria. For my trick here, I threw this together today. Listeria, I think of mother's hysteria. Okay, so I think of mothers, pregnant women, miscarriage, and hysteria. So I thought listeria and hysteria. Like I said, some are stupider than others, and this might not even be the dumbest one that I give you today. But I think it's a really nice one for us to go through here. Excellent, excellent. Well, I don't see any questions rolling through, and that's probably because you're all so bright. You know so much about listeria already. You're like, Zach, let's keep it moving on to our next one here. If that's how we're all feeling, let's go ahead and let's do so. Campylobacter jejuni. Jejuni. Now, I got to ask you, Arties, to be when you hear jejuni, you think of what? Post it in the chat if you know. We're going to prevent this foodborne illness by cooking foods to their required temperature, and two, preventing cross contamination. You see, we're just repeating a lot of the same types of things here. Just repeating the same type of topics is what we're doing. For your symptoms of Campylobacter jejuni, we're going to see things like diarrhea, whether it's watery or bloody, cramps, fever, vomiting, and headaches. Those are going to be the common things that can occur as a result of this. For the foods would be things like poultry, contaminated water, meats, stews, and gravies. Those are the types of things that we are going to think of when it comes to this. Here's my trick. When I think of jejuni, I think of jejunum, as many of you mentioned in the chat here. Because really, I picture that small intestine, and I picture, the jejunum, it's right about in the middle. It is the middle of the small intestine, but I imagine if you have a bad illness in the jejunum, or if there's something going on there, you're probably going to have some diarrheal issues because it's a little bit late in the GI tract. So when I think of jejuni, I think of jejunum because it's very close to the ileum in the colon, and it's likely you're going to have diarrhea as a result of that. So that's going to be your Campylobacter jejuni right there. Again, stews and gravies, that's one thing I would just kind of grip onto for this. Diarrhea is going to be a major symptom that you see. That's kind of the ways that I would help to differentiate this one from other different types of foodborne illnesses. You're doing great, folks. Excellent. Excellent. As you kind of wait for me, if you are able to like the video, that way you can see more of it, let other students know about it. Definitely appreciated. Also a reminder, if you don't get to stay for the whole session, remember, this is going to be posted after. It'll be uploaded in that live section on YouTube. So you can just come watch it for free anytime, as many times as you want to. You can comment on it. You can say I did a good job, a bad job, something you want more of. You just got to let me know there. Excellent. So let's do E. coli. E. coli. I'm not even going to try to say that first word here, folks. With E. coli, we can prevent this by cooking ground beef to required temperatures. Ground beef is in particular mentioned with E. coli because E. coli is found in our stomachs a lot of the time, but it's also found in the intestines of beef and cattle and animals like that. So that's kind of why we specify ground beef in particular and cooking it to its required temperature. Because undercooked ground beef really causes a big, wide outbreak of E. coli. Secondly, purchasing from reputable suppliers will help to avoid this because reputable suppliers or ones that are have good practices, they're going to make sure that their meat stays sanitary. So we don't have to worry all the time like with our stuff we get in the store. It's usually pretty safe for us, but if you were buying it from a random farmer you don't know, it might not be the most reputable source. Number 3 is avoid cross contamination. And number 4, exclude food handlers with an E. coli diagnosis. Get them out of there. We don't need them if they're having E. coli. Let's get them out. They're not a good fit to be working with food that day. For the symptoms of E. coli, we're going to have diarrhea, cramping, not crampting, and kidney failure when it's in really severe cases can occur there as well. For the foods, like I said, undercooked ground beef and contaminated produce. So, a lot of you may be familiar with cases in the past where there's been large outbreaks of things like lettuce or produce that developed E. coli. A lot of the time, that's because the bacteria that is found in the intestines of that cattle or animal ends up in the water, and then the water comes in contact with the lettuce or the produce product. So that's a really common way that produce can end up with E. coli too. And because you're not cooking a lot of your produce items or things like lettuce, it can really get people very, very sick. All right, here's the dumbest of the day. Trick here. E, my colon. E, my colon. Okay, so E. coli, E, my colon. That's going to help you to remember that the colon, we think of things like diarrhea, bowel movements, cramping, we could see there. And so that's going to be your dumbest trick of the day of how you're going to remember E. coli. Okay, here, folks? All right. Taking a little pause just in case I'm going too fast. We're doing great on time. Let me know in the chat if I'm missing something or if you need me to slow down, speed up, or if you just had a question for me along the way. But you're all doing really great here. Very good. Okay, good. Chat's looking quiet here, so let's keep on rolling here. All right. Excellent. Next one we're going to do here is going to be Clostridium perfringens. That's what I'm going to say there is Clostridium perfringens, okay? Clostridium perfringens is going to be prevented by 1, holding your food at correct temperatures, and 2, heating and cooling your food correctly. Okay, so really when we talk about time and temperature abuse, look what we got here. It's time and temperature abuse all the way. For your symptoms of Clostridium perfringens, we're going to have diarrhea, nausea, fever. Those are going to be the major things that you see with that. So make a little note of that fever that's on there too. That'd be a good thing to remember as well. For your foods, we're going to think of meat, poultry, stews, and gravies that have meat and poultry in them. Those are going to be your major sources of foods that can develop Clostridium perfringens there. For our trick for this one, I was trying my best to think of something clever, and I'm not always the most clever. So here's my trick. Cool foods in the fridge to avoid perfringens. So I saw fringe of perfringens and I thought of the word fridge. It kind of looks like the word fridge. So I was like, fringens, fridge. Cool foods in the fridge to avoid developing this foodborne illness here. Check my book too as I go through. See if I can throw some cool facts at you guys. What's nice about this one is, and the reason I think of the fridge is because Clostridium does not grow in the fridge, so it does not grow very well at temperatures that are cold. It really doesn't grow at all, and so that's why when we talk time and temperature abuse, we're right on the money here, is what we're thinking of. Yeah, Priscilla also mentioned in the chat here, C, Clostridium is for cafeteria like foods like gravy. Priscilla, I think you might be 10 times more clever than me already just based on that response, okay? So if you have more of those, or if all of you have more of those, keep them coming because it's going to work for all of you a lot better than it does me. Good. Yep, so as long as we keep stuff out of the danger zone, we're going to be A-okay when it comes to Clostridium perfringens, folks. All right, rolling it on here. Oh my gosh, Clostridium botulinum, or botulism, as I'm probably just going to call it here. It's just going to be botulism, is what we'll do. To prevent botulism, one, you got to make sure you can your foods correctly. So that's going to give you a clue of what things. But if you can products or you can foods, like I've tried to in the past, um, if you do it correctly, you probably won't develop Clostridium here. Secondly, hold, cool, and reheat foods correctly. Basically, what we're saying here is use your 6 hour rule to ensure your foods are not existing in that danger zone for very long. Get them cooled down, get them to a temperature where the bacteria is not going to be able to proliferate and form the spores in that case, okay? It does not grow very well in refrigerated or acidic foods, okay? The symptoms we see are nausea, vomiting, aphasia, difficulty finding my words, or dysphagia, difficulty swallowing. The other piece would be double vision. Double vision is something that can also happen with Clostridium botulinum. It can be fatal in some cases too when it gets really, really, really bad. The foods that I mentioned there was the canned foods as well as your reduced oxygen packaging foods. So we call those what? ROP foods. That's going to be like a sous vide item. Or I have these pieces of fish that are in, it's like frozen fish that's in my freezer. This isn't the best example, but let's say I have like a sous vide salmon, right? Where it's got all the oxygen taking out of it. Well, that'd be an example of an anaerobic food or a type of food where botulinum could grow pretty well there. So what we're seeing here over and over is anaerobic foods, foods that don't have a lot of oxygen, canned items, sous vide items. Honey is another one that we always talk about, especially for infants. I know you've all heard that multiple times there. My trick that I thought of for botulism, I'm really familiar with this one, so I don't always need a trick. It's a very lethal one, so it's one that I keep in my back pocket all the time. But that being said, my trick is botulism, double vision. Okay, so I thought of 4 syllables for those to associate some of those symptoms that we think of. Or here's another one, botulism anaerobic. Okay, so 4 syllables for each to think of just some associations of the type of foods that we would think of for botulism there. Looking great, folks. Looking great. Bottom of the can. Nice, Stephanie. Very good. Very, very good. I love that. Good. For those of you that have joined us just a little later here, it's good to have you here with us. No. No, don't do that. Okay. I'm going to stop touching things, folks. Okay. Excellent. So now that we're doing well on that, let's keep rocking on. We have a few more bacterial illnesses to go through. And now we're really looking more at cross-contamination here, folks. So cross-contamination is our next biggest concern here. Salmonella is one that we classically think of when it comes to this, right? Salmonella is right up that alley that we think of there. To prevent salmonella, as I said, cross-contamination needs to be avoided. Especially with poultry products, you got to avoid any cross contamination, whether that's from a cutting board that you're using, a knife, and then you use your produce items. That's not going to fly. You're going to develop salmonella if you do that. Excluding sick food handlers is also recommended for salmonella, and cooking foods to their required temperature is a great way to avoid it. It's a great way to try to kill off that bacteria by cooking them, especially your poultry, to the required temperatures. For symptoms of salmonella, we'll have fever, cramps, vomiting, and diarrhea, just to name a few. It's funny, it's like those are the ones you hear for everything. So it's like I mentioned the symptoms, but it just feels like it's the similar symptoms for everything. For foods here for salmonella, this is a little bit unique. Really specific to poultry, eggs, meat, milk, dairy, and our produce items, especially things like tomatoes, peppers, and cantaloupe. These are things that are more like ready to eat. Once they're cut into, you can really end up developing salmonella, or they can have salmonella on the outside of them. And when you cut into it, it can get into it. So that's another way. I thought my best trick for salmonella is I just think of salmon can get salmonella, meat can get salmonella, poultry can get salmonella. So you're seeing the types of foods that can end up with salmonella. So you can keep that one in your back pocket if you like that. Nice. For those of us that joined us just a little late, I'm just posting in the chat there. It's a link to the mailing list. If you do want to get a PDF of these slides and our exercise that we do at the end, click that link in the chat that I just posted, and you can join the mailing list and get the PDF for that. I'll try to get it sent out within the next couple days. If you don't see it, I am sending it, just working through students and other things first. All right. Looking great, RDs to be. Let's keep it going. Next bacteria we're going to talk about is ones that really talk about food handler hygiene. So these are the ones that are typically coming from people, okay, from people or from other things. Shigella is a great one to talk about because I think it's a really easy one to remember. Shigella can be prevented by excluding sick food handlers because um, usually Shigella is transferred through feces. Okay, so if a food handler has feces on their hands and then they're handling food, that's a very common way that Shigella will come into contact with foods. Washing hands, of course, that's a way we can prevent Shigella, especially for those sick food handlers. In controlling flies. Flies, when they land on feces, they then go and they land on foods. So the flies that have landed on the feces are then bringing that Shigella bacteria with them. The symptoms of this are going to be bloody diarrhea, cramps, and fever. Those will be our three major ones there. And then let's talk the foods. What you're noticing about these foods is it's a lot of uncooked products. And kind of what I want you to think of here is because that fly is landing, like we're having a picnic, right? The fly lands on feces and then it lands on our food. Well, if we're cooking that food, there's probably a good chance we would kill off any bacteria that the fly brought. But because these are mostly ready to eat foods, this is why we end up getting sick with Shigella in that case. Okay, so that's what's going on. So, ready to eat salads, like ready salads or like a chicken salad, a macaroni salad, a potato salad, something that was cooked, but now it's just been cooled down. A TCS food like that would be a food that you would think of there. And then contaminated water can also be a big one with Shigella there. My trick for this, pardon my language, it's just the easiest way to go about it is I think of Shigella and I think of the word shit because I think they just fit really well together and it's a fecal transfer between those two and it helps you to think of flies a lot of the time. So that's why I think it's a nice little trick to go about memorizing that one there. Excellent. Okay, doing good, everyone. Next one will be Staphylococcus aureus, okay? Now, when I think of Staphylococcus, I think of a staph infection. So keep that in your mind here. Prevent this staph infection by 1. Excluding a sick food handler. If someone has a staph infection, let's get them off the line. Let's get them away from food. Maybe put them to deal with trash or something in the back, but don't have them working with food. Wash hands, cover their wounds. So if they have wounds on their hand, make sure that those are going to be covered because that's where the staph infection lives. It can live in my nose, my mouth, it can live in my wounds, things like that, my hair. And if you cold, cool, and reheat foods correctly, you can usually prevent Staphylococcus aureus from developing there. The biggest thing is really it gets transferred from food handlers. The symptoms of this would be nausea, vomiting, and cramping. Those would be our big three. And then the foods that we associated with it, again, we're seeing some TCS items here like egg, tuna, chicken salad, pasta, because again, these foods they've usually already been cooked and now they've been cooled down. So if someone has bare hands and then they touch that food, well, the bacteria is then coming into contact with it. And if you're not cooking it, well, hey, it's going to just continue to grow, right? Deli meat, similar situation. You're not usually cooking deli meat, are you? And then infected handlers. So foods that are handled by an infected food handler, that's what's going to happen there. Trick, staph infections come from staph. So that's my just way of memorizing to say, hey, this is going to be transferred mostly from people who already have the infection. Okay, couple more bacteria to go through, and then we're on to our viruses. The bacterial list is really long. The viruses is like really short. So next one here is Vibrio vulnificus. It always sounds so really cool to me, this one. I don't know why. We would want to prevent Vibrio vulnificus by one, buying from reputable sources, and two, cooking to required temperatures. I'm going to jump over to our foods here really quick, or food specifically. Vibrio vulnificus usually affects oysters. And that's why when we say buy from reputable sources, that's what we're getting to with the oysters here. Because if you buy oysters from areas or water that is contaminated, or if you buy from a not so reputable source, that's how people get Vibrio vulnificus in that case. But if you're buying from a reputable source, more than likely it's not going to have that type of bacteria in those waters. They've already been approved, they're safe. So that's why you just want to buy from someone reputable. Your symptoms of Vibrio vulnificus will be fever, diarrhea, cramps, vomiting. And then for our tricks, I was thinking of very vulnerable oysters. So vulnificus, vulnerable oysters was my little trick of going like this. This can be really serious, especially in people who have diabetes or cirrhosis. It was saying in the text how if you have those conditions, you can end up with sepsis at the end of this. So definitely a very serious type of foodborne illness that can be developed here. But if you cook those oysters to the minimum temperature, or at least if you're doing raw oysters and you buy them from someone safe, you're probably going to be cool with that. All right, everyone. So let me know in the chat if we're doing good, we're feeling good on the bacteria. We're going to move on to our viruses, parasites, and then go into our seafood toxins before we do our exercise of the night. Let me know if you want me to slow down, speed up, or just adjust some things, but I say let's just keep rocking along here. For our viruses, remember, this is going to be very different. Bacteria ends up on a food and then it grows. These usually it kind of has it, right? So for hepatitis A is usually transferred from a food handler, okay? I put here exclude sick food handlers. That's what we're seeing for almost all of our viruses here, and especially hepatitis A. So with hepatitis A, it's a fecal transfer. So someone has feces on their hands and then they handle food. So that's why we would want to exclude a sick food handler with hepatitis. You want to look for jaundice, right? Jaundice is that yellowing effect that occurs in someone that has liver disease or hepatitis specifically in this case. So you want to look for a jaundiced employee and immediately get them out of the facility or at least away from food and off the line because they're going to get someone else sick for sure. Washing hands helps prevent it, and purchasing from reputable sources is another way to prevent hepatitis A. Your symptoms would be fever, weakness, nausea, abdominal pain, and like I said, that jaundice is going to be a big key to hepatitis A there. So that's going to be the biggest one there. This is one I'm always afraid that I'm going to get just because I knew someone once who got it, and I'm always like, that sounds terrible and sounds really gross when you find out how you get it. So it's kind of a scary one there. For foods here, we're going to think of ready to eat foods, shellfish, and contaminated waters. These can all be ways that hepatitis A can be developed there. And then our trick that we'll think of for hepatitis A will be things like jaundice and liver inflammation. So hepatic is going to mean liver. So then you're going to be thinking of liver inflammation and you're going to think of jaundice in that case. That's going to be your little clue for remembering hepatitis in that case. Okay, doing great. Next one's norovirus, my second one that I'm most afraid of. Norovirus is prevented by 1, excluding sick food handlers, 2, washing hands, and 3, purchasing your foods from reputable sources. That's going to be the best way that we go about this here. The symptoms of norovirus are going to be vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, and cramps. The foods that it ends up occurring this on are going to be things like our ready to eat foods and our shellfish that are from contaminated waters. Now, with norovirus, I always think of this as being the cruise ship virus. And the reason it's kind of known as that cruise ship virus is it's very contractible. It spreads like a wildfire, so to speak. So this isn't to pick on Norwegian cruises. I have no idea if Norwegian cruises had a norovirus breakout. Maybe they have. But I just think of cruise ship and I think of Norro, Norway, Norwegian cruises. That's kind of what I think of there as my little trick to remember that it's a cruise ship virus and that it's very communicable, really spreads fast, and that it's a virus there. What else do I want to talk about with norovirus? People tend to become contagious only a few hours after eating, and it often stays in your feces for days after symptoms have ended. And it's kind of an interesting one. It's like norovirus, it affects you for what, like 3 to 5 days or so. And it's like it's just enough time to ruin your cruise. That's what I think of. Just enough time to ruin your cruise if you end up with this one here. So just be very cautious and very aware of how people handle food if you go on a cruise. I'm going on one in the fall and I'm terrified, but it'll go fine. Okay, now we're bouncing on to parasites here. Okay, so we're going to hit our parasites. With almost all of these parasites, if you purchase from reputable sources, that's going to be the best way to prevent it. Okay, because a lot of the times these parasites are found in water or found in foods, and they end up basically, I don't know, you get foods from areas where you shouldn't, or it got washed with something it shouldn't. This is a good example of that. Anisakis simplex. Anisakis simplex is prevented by cooking foods to their correct temperature and purchasing sushi grade fish that has been correctly frozen. So you already can put together what types of foods we're going to think of for Anisakis simplex. That'll be things like herring, cod, not code, halibut, mackerel, salmon. The symptoms of it, look at this, so freaky. Tingling in your throat and coughing up worms. Can you believe that? Coughing up worms. It seems so scary to me. Biggest fear in my life, I think. And that puts together a little bit of what the parasite is. The parasite is a worm, of course. It's a living thing that, I don't know, you kind of more physically see on stuff. And it really grows on raw foods. So if you're cooking your fish to the minimum temperature, you're probably going to kill off any anisakis that lives, and it's not going to be a problem. But it is a problem when you're doing things like sushi or raw fish because there's nothing to kill off that parasite. So I think of simplex, I think of sushi, S and S in that case. Definitely a weird one there. So sushi, simplex, raw fish, there's what we'll think of. This one might not be one that you're as familiar with. It was mentioned in this text, and that's why I said, do I want to talk about it? And I just, at the end of it, I threw it in just because I wanted to make sure I was covering all my bases here. Cyclospora cayetanensis. That's my best guess there. Cyclospora, that word, is going to be prevented by purchasing from reputable suppliers and excluding sick food handlers that may have this parasite. The symptoms of it are going to be nausea, cramps, fever, diarrhea, and constipation. It starts as diarrhea, then it shifts to constipation and back and forth. Weight loss and appetite loss also occur with this one. This Cyclospora C ends up on a lot of produce items. So, specifically in the text, it mentioned things like berries, basil, lettuce, not foods we typically think of, but produce items is how it's going to get there. And more than likely, it gets there from untreated water. So, if you're washing these fruits and vegetables with untreated water or water that has the parasite in it, it ends up getting on the food. You eat it and you get the parasite. My trick for this one is I thought of cyclone and water. So cyclospora, I thought of cyclone, and it made me think of water in that case. Yep. So exactly as I said, anything that's been irrigated or like if I watered my berries with contaminated water, it's going to get the parasite. Or if I wash my lettuce with the contaminated water, it's going to become parasitic then. Cryptosporidium parvum, maybe another one you're not as familiar with, but was mentioned in this text, so I thought it'd be very good. Cryptosporidium parvum is prevented by using treated water. So again, we're coming back to the water for almost all of these parasites, as you can see. Exclude your sick food handlers that may have the parasite and make sure that they wash their hands or everyone washes their hands as they should. The symptoms of it is watery diarrhea, cramps, nausea, and weight loss. The foods that we would see would be contaminated water, and then the produce that is washed with that contaminated water, that's how it's going to end up with that condition too. But a lot of the times, if you have a food handler who has this parasite and they have feces on their hands, they have the parasite on their hands. So if they handle your produce or handle your ready to eat foods, then this can be how it ends up in your food products there. Another thing that I want to mention here is that Cryptosporidium parvum occurs a lot of the time in daycares, in medical communities, and long term care facilities. So it happens a lot in those person to person spread of the parasite because, someone's changing a diaper, they touch feces, then they touch another kid, and that's how it gets spread around in that way. So spreads very rapidly. Now, this is a parasite. My little trick here is not a parasite, but it's still a good fit. Dogs with parvo. Okay, so parvo, if let me know in the chat if you've ever heard of parvo before. We've had lots of foster puppies and things like that, so we've seen our fair share of parvo. Parvo is a condition that happens with dogs and it usually causes like diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, things like that. So I thought of parvum and I thought of parvo that occurs with little puppies and dogs. So if that resonates with any of you, I thought it was worth it to add in there too. Great. Okay, doing great, folks. Next one is Giardia. Giardia duodenalis. Giardia duodenalis is prevented by using treated water. So once again, we're back to the water here. Exclude your sick food handlers that may have Giardia and make sure they wash their hands. For symptoms, it would be fever, diarrhea, cramps, and nausea. In the foods, once again, we're seeing contaminated water and produce being involved here. My little trick that I put here, and now I feel like I'm being too harsh on people, but I was always told that you don't drink the water in Mexico because much of the water in Mexico has Giardia. I think it said there was like a, I don't know, 50% of people in Mexico may end up with Giardia at some point in their life. So it's very, very common, I was told. But then again, I was like, I mean, is the water in the US all that great? Probably not. So just something to think about there. But that's been always my trick of like why you shouldn't drink the water in other countries is because it likely has the Giardia duodenalis parasite in them there. Also, keeping in mind, of course, those food handlers that may have Giardia, if they have feces on their hands and then they touch food, that is also how you're going to pass this parasite on to other people there. So that's why we say exclude sick food handlers. Montezuma's Revenge. Nice, Tyler. Got it. I knew I had heard that before, but I can't remember. I was like, is that what it's called? Like, if you told me that, I'm like, I get the reference, but I was like, is that what it was? Now I remember. Now I know. See, you're all teaching me too. All right, excellent. Got 10 great arties to be in here. Again, like if you haven't, 12 great arties to be. Yeah, like the video if you haven't. And remember, if you can't stay for the full session, just watch it later. It's going to be up there for free on the RD Exam Ready YouTube page. Just go into that live section and you got that in there. Also, once again, if you want the PDF of these slides, I put that mailing list link in the chat. So make sure you sign up for that if you want to get those, okay? All right. Wrapping up here, we're going to go through our seafood toxins here. Then we're going to go ahead and move on to our matching exercise here to apply our knowledge. So for our seafood toxins, we know our foods are going to be all seafood, but they can be a little particular on the type of seafood. So let's make sure we pay attention to that. Starting with histamines, okay? So histamine is prevented by avoiding time and temperature abuse during storage and prep. For the foods that this can affect, it's going to affect things like tuna, bonito, mackerel, and mahi mahi. Really big, big fish I picture here. Like tuna, it's big. Bonito is pretty big. Mahi mahi can be big fish. So I picture these big fishies that this occurs with. The symptoms that we see for histamine, I mentioned here, are allergic reaction symptoms. And I want to mention that because of my trick here. So the allergic reaction symptoms, it's not an allergic reaction, just to be clear, but the symptoms closely replicate one. That would be things like a red face, sweating, headache, tingling in your mouth and throat, diarrhea, and vomiting. And I think that fits up with my trick really well because remember, whenever you're having an allergic reaction, it's usually has something to do with histamines or think of antihistamines with allergies, right? So I think if you think of allergic reactive symptoms like that, it's going to fit really well with histamine because they already sound like they're so closely associated. Even though this histamine toxin is actually not an allergic reaction, but as I said, it's causing completely similar symptoms as you can see here. So I think that's really cool to remember. Nice. Next one is Shiga toxin. That's what I always call it there. Shiga toxin is prevented by purchasing from approved and reputable sources. Shiga toxin is one of those toxins that it's going to be found in some marine algae. Okay, so within algae in the ocean, basically the little fishies they eat the algae. Okay, then the big fishies, the ones that are predatory, we call them, eat the small fish. So when the predatory fish eat the small fish, they end up taking in excessive amounts of that toxin. So those predatory fish you're going to think of as like a barracuda, grouper, jacks, red snapper or snapper, picture Finding Nemo, the barracuda in the first scene, you picture it's a predatory fish, right? The symptoms of shigatoxin would be hot and cold sensations. So you get chills and then you get hot. Nausea, vomiting, tingling, joint and muscle pain are just a few of the things that we would see with that. Shigatoxin is not destroyed by heat. Okay, so you cannot, I put here purchase from approved reputable suppliers. That's your only way you're going to get rid of that shigatoxin. You can't cook it off. It's not going to get rid of the toxin just because you cook it or cool it. So, my trick here, think of reef fish, okay? Like Finding Nemo, like the barracuda that's in the reef. What it leads to is it leads to reverse hot and cold. And then another note that someone made was the runs, okay? So you can end up with, well, I guess we don't really have diarrhea in there. Let me double check here. No, diarrhea isn't really a symptom that we have listed here for shigatoxin. So for the runs, maybe we just forget about that for right now. But it said reef fish are, and we think of reverse hot and cold. Okay? So think of reverse hot and cold is what you'll see for that one there. Shigatoxin, those predatory fishies. Brevetoxin is another toxin here, which once again, brevetoxin is the only way to prevent it is that you're going to have to purchase from a reputable supplier because you can't smell it, you can't taste it, and you cannot destroy it by cooking or freezing it. Cannot be destroyed. So purchase from reputable supplier. The symptoms you're going to see would be tingling, dizziness, hot and cold sensations, vomiting, and diarrhea. And this happens with the foods that are more like shellfish based. So clams, mussels, oysters, those are the types of things that end up with brevetoxin. And my trick here is that brevetoxin braves cooking and freezing. So I think of breve and brave. Braves cooking and freezing both there. Yep. Typically found in a lot of those warmer waters is what we see. So like in the Gulf of, all right, I'm going to call it the Gulf of Mexico, just because that feels much more natural to me. But Florida, Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, those are going to be areas where brevetoxin can occur there. Okay. Domoic acid. This is once again, it's one we need to purchase from a reputable supplier. That's how we go about it. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't destroy it. Got to get it from a reputable supplier. The symptoms of it are going to be vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, confusion, memory loss, disorientation, seizure, and a coma possibly. We're seeing our seafood here: clams, mussels, oysters, scallops. And then the trick I put here is D, domoic, and D, disorientation, because I feel like it's causing a lot of like memory issues, coma, seizure, disorientation, confusion type of thing. Or how about we add here domoic and dementia? We could put that in there too. I'm just saying domoic and dementia because it's kind of making you have dementia type symptoms, is what it kind of feels like to me. Okay. Okay. Where did my last one go? Oh, I thought it skipped one for me. Sorry about that. Saxitoxin. Saxitoxin is going to be prevented from purchasing from a reputable supplier here for saxitoxin. This one cannot be smelled or tasted. It is not destroyed by cooking or freezing. It can be very, very drastic too if you end up coming in contact with this. Symptoms are going to be numbness, tingling, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. It occurs with our shellfish here: clams, mussels, oysters, and scallops. And your trick you could think of as shellfish S, saxitoxin S. We can put those together in that case, and that's kind of what can occur there. All right, everyone. So now let's do our matching exercise. So here's what our plan is going to be. Because we could all, really go into this a lot of different ways, what we're going to do is we're going to start with number one together. And we're going to look together and we're going to all see what we feel like is our best fit out of this list over here. Okay? So one, don't be afraid of being wrong. If you feel like you know which one it is, just post it into the chat. Remember, you're not going to hurt anyone. No one's going to shame you if you get something wrong. I get stuff wrong all the time, so you should feel comfortable with doing that too. But if I don't see him in the chat here, I'm just going to be talking through what I kind of think here a little bit as we do our stuff, okay? Right. Very good. So, again, if you want to download this quiz, join this mailing list. This was really helpful for me when I was studying, just to be like, hey, I need a way to test my answers and test my work. So, this is what I would do all the time when I did that. So, let's start with number one. We have poultry, water, meat, stews, and gravies found in the intestines of animals in contaminated water, and most common diarrheal illness. Okay. Most common diarrheal illness. Well, kind of based on what it said there, I know it's not going to be, I know it's not going to be A. I know it's not going to be C just because we know the types of foods that C would be associated with. I would say no to D, no to E, no to F, no to G, no to H, no to I. Okay, so if I was looking between these two, I would probably be between Campylobacteria jejuni and Clostridium perfringens. That's probably what I would be between. The only reason I might not go with something like E. coli is because with E. coli, I would maybe be looking for more of like my ground beef, for instance. Um, Probably ground beef is something I would look for like E. coli in that case. So I'm kind of split between those two. I would say mostly because remember we talked about the jejunum and we talked about diarrhea, right? We really specifically mentioned the jejunum and diarrhea. So I think it could be either one, but I would say at least my best fit would be answer B for this one. That's what my feeling is for that one. I did include a little key at the end of here, so if you want, you can check your work at the end if you'd like to. But I feel like B is going to be my best fit for that one, folks. All right, let's do number two here. Excuse me. Raw poultry, eggs, dairy, shed in the feces of plants and animals, diarrhea, fever, and vomiting. Okay. So let's think of those foods a little bit there, folks. So we've got raw poultry, eggs, and dairy. What did we really think of when we heard those types of foods? What did you think of for that? I don't think it's Shigella. I don't think it's Bacillus cereus because we talked about different foods. I don't think it's Listeria because once again, we talked about different foods with Listeria. It might be Salmonella. It's not botulism. It's not Vibrio. It's not E. coli. I don't think it's Staphylococcus either, although maybe. And maybe Clostridium. So if I was between like E, Salmonella, and J, I feel like E would be a better fit for it, just based on the fact that we know Salmonella is commonly associated with meat, eggs, dairy, and specifically poultry a lot of the time, right? We really look at that poultry. So let's put Salmonella for that one. And let me know if you all disagree or not. Okay. And even if you don't put your answer in the chat, remember, if you just speak it out into existence, that's perfect. We're happy with that. All right, number three, poultry, water, dairy, and meats shed in the feces of an infected person and carried by flies, bloody diarrhea, fever, and cramps. So we talked about flies, right? I used this word that I'm not going to say out loud in case my daughter's listening. That was kind of our memory trick that we thought of for this one. So, based on the flies angle, what would you all say is your best fit for number three? What would you say? Okay. See an answer in the chat dropping in. Okay. Looking great. I agree with you folks there. A lot of you that are dropping in the chat. I would say number three, because of what we talked about for that S word, it's going to be fitting very well with Shigella. I think Shigella is going to be a great fit for number 3 there. Okay. All right, let's do number 4. Contaminated water, oysters, shellfish, common in warmer summer months, diarrhea, vomiting, cramps, fever, and chills. Which one did we say fit well with oysters, folks? Which one was really associated with our oysters that we saw there? What was the one we thought of there? Oysters, oysters. There's really only one bacteria that we thought of when it came to those oysters, right? I would say with the oysters, our best one would be the very vulnerable oysters, which should be answer G, Vibrio vulnificus. Vibrio vulnificus. That's what I would say answer G would be there. Number 5, fried rice, cooked vegetables, meats, a spore forming bacteria caused by poor cooling of foods that has both diarrheal and vomiting illness. What would this one be? What do we think of for that fried rice products here, folks? What did we really put together for our fried rice, our rice dishes, my snake that's swimming through my rice dishes, pasta dishes? In that case, we really thought of that basilisk and the Bacillus cereus. So Bacillus cereus will be our best fit for number 5. Looking great, folks. Looking great. Love these answers. You're all doing so well. Okay. Number 6, raw meat, soft cheeses, deli meats, hot dogs. It loves cool and moist environments, and it's going to be a worry for pregnant women because it may cause miscarriage, sepsis in the newborns, or meningitis in newborns. I think of hysteria and listeria, right? So listeria is going to be my best fit for number 6 there. That one that we really think of for pregnant women there. Good work. Number 7, ground beef, produce, and unpasteurized dairy products. Let's see. Ground beef, produce, unpasteurized foods found in humans and animal intestines through food handler transfer can lead to cramping, diarrhea, and vomiting. Now, the ground beef really makes me think of specifically one foodborne illness. It's not exclusively this one, but for that one with ground beef, I'm really going to go to our E. coli. I think E. coli would be a great fit based on what we've talked about. And we talked about my colon, right? Because it's causing that diarrhea that can occur there too. So my colon there. Okay. All right. Number 8. Oh, there's still one more after that. Okay. Oh, good. I'm not short on all my answers here. Okay. So for number 8, we've got F, I, and J left. So I put here meat, poultry, stews, gravies, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting can occur in hospitals, cafeteria, or prison type settings. Okay, what would we think of more for like cafeterias, prison settings, hospitals, those types of foods? What would you say there for number 8? For number 8, I don't think it's going to be staphylococcus. And above that was botulism. I don't think botulism is going to fit well for those foods. So I would probably have to say Clostridium perfringens. I would say that's going to be my best fit for that one there. Good job, folks. Looking good. Okay, we've got 2 more to do here. F and I. F and I. I'm going to flip over here. So F is botulism. And I was let's see if I can spell staphylococcal. We're going to say that's how you spell staphylococcus, okay? So for number 9, ready to eat cold salads, deli meats found in hair, skin, wound, nails of those food handlers can lead to nausea, vomiting, stomach cramping, and rash with skin contact. That sure does not sound like botulism to me. It really sounds to me like number 9 is going to be staphylococcus. Staphylococcus, very good, everyone, is going to be our best fit for number 9. And number 10, canned foods, sous vide foods, spore forming from home canning and preservation can lead to double vision, aphasia, dysphagia, and death. That would be botulism, Clostridium botulinum. That would be our best fit for that one there, folks. Okay. Good. Does this feel like a helpful exercise to all of you? Let me know in the chat if you think it is. I mean, I imagine it is. I think it helps to see all of them and to do some level of differentiation between them. Like Laura, kind of you brought up about, the difference between like the J. Juni and the perfringens. Laura, you bring that up, and it's such a good point because I was struggling with that as I was making this quiz, right? Because they have such close similarities. So it's not even like you're wrong. It's just what's the best answer between the two is kind of what we're going with there. So great points to make there. Okay, so we're going to do viruses, parasites, and then we're going to do our toxins, and then we're going to call it a night. Going a few minutes over here, folks. Oh, sorry, Priscilla. Sorry about that. RTE means ready to eat. Ready to eat foods is that what that is, Priscilla? So think of things like, cold salads, produce items, things that we're not cooking usually. It's just ready to go. Oh, thanks, Shakira. Thanks for jumping in there. So for our viruses, we only have 2 to go with here. So go ahead and take a look. Let's start with number 1. Ready to eat foods, shellfish in contaminated waters, the cruise ship virus from improper hand washing, vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, and cramps. Would be a good fit for that one, folks. Good. I would say with the cruise ship virus, think of Norwegian cruises and norovirus. Okay. Then for number 2, ready to eat foods, contaminated foods, infected food handlers, jaundice, weakness, fever, and an abdominal pain. Our best answer for this one would have to be hepatitis, just based on the fact that we know if there's jaundice, yellowing of the skin, it's got to be hepatitis in that case, right, folks? Viruses aren't too bad, I feel like, compared to the bacteria ones. There's so many. The toxins, there's so many. The viruses and the parasites seem okay to me. All right, so let's look at some parasites here, okay? So we got 4 parasites that we're going to flip together here, and let's see if we can fit those together. Now, be careful with these because water is almost in all of these, right? So let's try to find out that differentiation that we're going to use for those there. For parasites, contaminated water, ready to eat foods, improperly treated water causing GI distress and malabsorption can lead to fever, diarrhea, greasy stools, cramps, and nausea. Okay. I don't think it's going to be anisaxis, and I don't think it's going to be that cyclospora C word, because I don't think of those as the foods that we thought of there. There was some specific foods that those 2 mentioned, and I just don't feel like it's a good fit there. So I'm probably between Giardia and Cryptosporidium parvum in that case. And if I'm going to go between the 2, I think I want to go with Giardia for this one. That's probably what I feel like is going to be my best fit for the giardia there. The fever fits, the diarrhea fits, the cramps and nausea fit. We didn't mention greasy stool, but that's another thing that can occur there. So for now, I'm gonna go with giardia on this one. I'm just gonna go ahead and say A for this one. Okay. It really could go either way though, probably. For number 2, contaminated water, produce, daycare and medical facility outbreaks with fecal transmission, diarrhea, cramps, nausea, and weight loss is another thing, okay? So if you remember from our what we talked about today, I talked about one of those two there, Giardia and Cryptosporidium. There's only one of those that was actually causing weight loss. And for number 2, the one that was actually causing weight loss was Cryptosporidium parvum. Okay, the parvo that we talked about with the puppies, that's going to be our best fit for number 2 right here. Number 3, raw fish, undercooked foods, vomiting, pain, nausea, and diarrhea. Well, when fish is mentioned, there was really one specific parasite that we talked about today that really was associated with fish. Many of them were associated with water and produce, but only one of them was really closely associated with fish. If you remember which one that was going to be Anisakis. Anisakis is going to be this one here for C. And for number 4, our last one for parasites would be untreated water, produce washed with contaminated water, nausea, cramps, fever, diarrhea, and constipation, weight loss, appetite loss, making sure you buy from approved suppliers. That produce that's washed there, remember I talked about specifically the berries, the basil, and the lettuce. Those were particular ones that were associated with our last one here, which was Cyclospora, the C word. Okay, so A, B, C, and D for those parasites there. All right, you're all doing a great job. All right, let's wrap this up for the night with our toxins. 5 to go through. We got this thing. Remember, with the toxins, let's think about a little bit where they came from, the types of foods associated. That's the type of stuff we're going to think of here. This is dominic acid, like Donovan McNabb, but I think it's meant to say domoic acid. That's really weird. Domoic. I wrote Dominic acid. Huh, weird. Okay. For number 1, warm water like the Gulf of Mexico, clams, mussels, oysters, not killed by freezing, cooking infected fish, lip tingling, dizziness. What did we think of this warm water one? What was that warm water one that we really put in our minds there? I don't think it was saxitoxin. I don't think it was a good fit for that one there. I know it's not brevetoxin and histamine because, oh, wait, no. Sorry, let me back that up. I know it's not histamine or shigatoxin because I know those ones were kind of more associated with like fishies, right? Like I thought of histamine and shigatoxin for fishies. So I feel like brevetoxin Brevetoxin is going to be my best answer for number 1 here. Brevetoxin is that one that is associated with these types of foods, clams, mussels, oysters, but especially those ones found in warmer climates like the Gulf of Mexico. So brevetoxin there will be our best fit for number 1. Number 2, clams, mussels, oysters, scallops cannot be killed by freezing and cooking. Comes from infected fish, and it comes from vomiting, diarrhea, pain, and death. Okay, these are different things that can occur as a result of this one here. Very serious one there. For number 2, again, when I think of clams, mussels, oysters, scallops, I know it's not It's not D, and it's not E. And I don't think it's A either. I would say my best answer for number two, based on what I know, based on how serious a lot of these symptoms were, is probably going to be that domoic acid thing. Okay. So I'm going to put answer B for number two here. Number three, clams, mussels, oysters, scallops, paralytic. It's not killed by freezing and cooking, and it can lead to numbness, tingling, paralysis, nausea, and vomiting. There's only one more of these that was really associated with mussels, clams, oysters, scallops. Can you remember which one it was? It's not histamine because that's with fishies. It's not shigatoxin because that's with fish. So it must be saxitoxin. It must be A as our best fit for this one here. All right. Last two of the night. Predatory fish, barracuda, grouper, sturgeon, snapper. The predatory fish eats smaller infected fish. It ends up with hot and cold sensations, nausea, vomiting, tingling, and diarrhea. Hmm. Well, I remember the histamine talked about more of like those allergic reaction symptoms, right? And so when I read this, hot and cold, vomiting, tingling, diarrhea, that doesn't really sound like a food allergy reaction to me. So I don't think it's D. I actually think number four is going to be E, shigatoxin, which we see with a lot of those predatory fish because they eat the smaller fish and the smaller fish eat the algae. And last one of the night, tuna, bonito mackerel, mahi mahi. Time and temperature abuse causes this headache, tingling, palpitations, rash, diarrhea, and vomiting. This one is going to be coming from histamine. If you eat that raw sushi or those raw fish products, you're likely to end up with histamine poisoning if you're not getting it from a good, reputable supplier in that case. Okay. All right, students. So, tonight we went through all of our major foodborne illnesses. You all worked very hard. You put yourself out there. Thank you for sticking around through the whole session. If you did, if you didn't, remember go back and watch this thing again. It's good to get repetitions with this stuff. Remember to follow me, subscribe to all those things that I mentioned there in the beginning. Get on the mailing list if you do want to get some copies of these slides and PDFs. Reach out to me for advice, reach out to me and just promote the show if you don't mind. I love to help artists to be like you all so much. I love to give back to you all. So please come back, please attend, please tell your fellow students so that they can also get assistance along their path of being a dietitian. As always, happy studying to all of you artists to be. I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.